And good morning. We are live on the Falcons Podcast. It is Wednesday morning as we get ready for an extended weekend before the Atlanta Falcons take on the Las Vegas Raiders on Monday Night Football. A little programming note, we will be here on Monday. We will be here on Tuesday. We will see about Wednesday. When I say we, I mean the royal we, all of us. The Falcons Podcast will be here. Nick likely won't be with us, but I will be here to react with y'all depending on what happens. And Nick, the Atlanta Falcons have a long and glorious history of embarrassing their fans in some of the most spectacular ways, including arguably the most spectacular way in NFL history. We can go through the pain of being a Falcons fan, and everybody can list some. Everybody's got the same number one. That one is just off the charts. But when you start talking about the top five, I remember this. God, that was awful. This was awful. This was awful. Falcons fans have scars. Nick, losing to Desmond Ridder against the 2-11 Las Vegas Raiders would rank right up there as far as, are you kidding me? And not just because you lose to him. Yeah, that's ha-ha enough. But, I mean, he's got a chance to basically end the Falcons season after being kicked to the curb for Kirk Cousins in the offseason, Nick.
Yeah, it would be very painful. I mean, he was not good here in Atlanta. Obviously, he had a year starting, and there were some flashes here or there, but overall, one of the worst quarterbacks in football last season. I mean, he was traded and released before even the season started from the Cardinals as well, if I recall. I don't think it happened later.
No, he didn't make the 53. That's why he's a Raider.
Yep,
he was cut. And he mentioned that about, being humble. This game will humble you. I've been cut. I know what pain is like. And it was a heartfelt moment. And then he got re-signed to the practice squad. And then which in essence makes him a free agent. And the Raiders plucked him up. And when Aiden O'Connell went down, they're on their third quarterback. And if Aiden O'Connell's unable to go, which right now I think he's trending that direction, Desmond Ridder is going to be the quarterback Monday night for the Raiders.
Yeah, Aiden O'Connell, he suffered a serious knee injury, I believe. So he's going to be
he's got like a bone bruise, which,
okay.
They thought it was going to be worse. He went out in an air cast. The most painful injury, and I've broken about a dozen bones. The most painful injury I ever had was a hyperextension of my knee that I had a bone bruise on. And the second time when I saw the MRI, it looked like two Q-tips had been dipped in black ink and then stuck together like this. And then when I went back like 3 weeks later, my orthopedist was like, let's do another x-ray to make sure the bones didn't collapse. So a bone bruise is no joke. It was worse than any of the breaks I've had. And like I said, I've broken about a dozen bones. So it can be very serious, very, very, very painful.
Yeah, it sounds not great. I've not had one, fortunately. But, we'll see. The losing to Desmond Ridder would stink, and I think I'd expect him to play. I mean, is Aiden O'Connell the long-term answer here for the Raiders? No, but he might be a backup. I don't think there's any reason to force him out there, especially because he's already one of the most immobile quarterbacks in football. Now, granted, if you could pick any team to go against with your quarterback not having mobility and being injured, probably be the Falcons pass rush. But although I think that, they maybe figured some things out. They were in Sam Darnold's face, and they had a better game the week prior as well against
Justin. They got 9 sacks in the last 2 days. Last 2 games.
Yeah, so maybe they figured something out. Hey, maybe we have a Jimmy Lake redemption arc towards the second half of the season that does just enough to, have the team, keep him around and have, some fans, he turned it around, see what they said about him, et cetera, et cetera. But, you never know. But yeah, it would be dreadful to lose to this Raiders team currently, not only bad, Scott, but selected or the number one favorite pole position for the number one draft pick in the draft as well. So the worst team in football, and Desmond Ridder, who probably is the worst starting quarterback in football right now too. Although it's possible. It is possible.
And you think it can't happen. You're like, no way. And then you look back and you're like, do you know when it went off the wheels? The last high point, and then it went off a cliff last year. Do you remember the moment?
I do not.
It was on the road. They had just won and taken the lead in the division. They had just won on the road in Tampa Bay. And then it fell off. Then the wheels fell off. Sound familiar? You go up to 6-3. You just took Tampa Bay again, swept Tampa Bay, 2.5 game lead in the division. Haven't won a game since. It's like, that's beating Tampa Bay is not your Super Bowl, guys. Come on. There's more games to be played. We come in live on Mondays and Wednesdays because we like having the conversation with y'all. And there are some folks that have come in with some support for the show, which is much appreciated all year long. And we want to say hello to them, like Greg Elrod coming in. Greg, good to see you. He says, good morning, Scott Nostradamus Kennedy. I've prepared myself to lose to Desmond. The bottom of the barrel has been a long time coming. Now it's here. Yeah. Some of us know about hitting rock bottom and what, the value of that. Oh, you thought rock bottom had already been here for the Atlanta Falcons. This would be the biggest low. Losing to him would be the biggest low since that game we won't talk about. Now, part of you, I'm telling you, Falcons fans, tell me I'm wrong here. Doesn't part of you actually end up being just a little curious? How bad can it get? Because you say, like, Greg is here, and then I'm going to go to Titus. Titus comes in with a super chat. Thank you so much. It feels like a newer name on the super chat ring here, and it means a lot that y'all are helping to support the show and feel well enough, feel good enough about what we do to support your show with financially like that. It's humbling. But he says, we all know the most falconing thing could happen is to lose to the quarterback you booted out of town last season with the $100 million quarterback brought in to replace him and the top 10 pick, not to mention the top 10 pick that you've got. I mean, you didn't just spend money. You used a high pick. I mean, you went after the quarterback room. You spent more on the quarterback room than anybody really has in one offseason since maybe the Russell Wilson trade, with the big trade expenditures. Doesn't part of you honestly think it'd be kind of funny? I mean, Falcons fans are so used to getting kicked in the nards that there's part of you that kind of wants to see it. It's the masochists in us that are like, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me a bit. That's what it's like being a Falcons fan sometimes, Nick.
Yeah, I'm not pulling for it at all.
We're not pulling for it, but we're also, I guarantee you, everybody that's on their list is like, yeah, he's right. I know.
Could happen.
This is how the script is coming out. This is what it's been like for us for decades.
Well, luckily, there's not many teams that I'd rather play than the Raiders right now. Now, granted, the Raiders are still playing tough for their coach, Antonio Pierce, even though he might be a dead man walking as far as the head coach goes. The defense is still playing tough, and they have a superstar emerging player in former Georgia tight end Brock Bowers, who is having a hell of a season. I mean, I know that, probably it'll be quarterback Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, but there's probably no rookie player having a more outstanding position relative to their position and their peers than Brock Bowers this season. And he's going to be a tough one for this Falcons defense. Obviously, you do have Bates, so hopefully you can limit him a bit, but he's been phenomenal this season. So again, this is a pretty poor Raiders team. They can't run the ball to save their life. And their defense is okay. It's below average, especially in the secondary. But they're playing what'll be really interesting with this game, Scott, not to just immediately get into the minutia of it, but this Raiders team, they've kind of said, F it, we're just going to blitz like crazy. And they've been one of the highest cover zero teams in football because they're like, okay, we already don't have the guys in the back end. How much help is it actually, playing cover 4, cover 6, and being conservative back there? They're getting cooked. The only chance we have is to get home quickly and hope that we can rally underneath. And that's what they've done here as of late. They did that against Tampa. They did that against Denver. They did that against Kansas City. They've been playing a lot of cover 0. So it'll be an interesting matchup, no doubt. The Falcons should win. I don't know what the line is. I'd imagine it's probably 5.5 Atlanta. That'd be somebody in the chat can get me there, but I would put it at 5.5 for Atlanta, especially with the defense playing a little bit better here, in my opinion, even though you just gave up 42.
3.5. It's
3.5
to 3.5.
Okay.
So let's see what they say. 5. Yep, you're on it. Over under at 44.5.
Yep. So I feel 5.5 for this team. Again, this is the Raiders haven't given up. They're just so devoid of talent. And you talk about a team bottom of the barrel and everything, Scott, like this this sucks relative to expectation, especially because it feels like you're squandering a situation. But you have like pieces here, right? This isn't a roster devoid of talent, which makes it more frustrating. But I also wouldn't say that it's hopeless. Where you watch a team like the Raiders or the Giants right now, or the Jags with Mac Jones, like that is hopeless, hapless, rudderless, nothing to build on. Multiple off seasons to get it right. Although maybe not with the Jags, because Trevor Lawrence I still think is a pretty good quarterback. But
and JM Huddle comes in with coming along these lines. He says, "Good morning, Scott. Nick, would you sacrifice this game if it meant Penix would start the last 3 games?" And he's got big, sarcastic emojis on there. And obviously, no. And I put this in the description of the show. It's like you've got a chance to hit another low of low, or you could be in first place in the NFC South. You're favored. Tampa Bay's an underdog. So, I mean, if the games play out the way they're predicted, the Falcons are back in first place Tuesday morning. So, no, you wouldn't. And frankly, this team, it's hard to believe that they're as bad as they've looked the last month. When we've seen that they can be so much better than that. We've seen Kirk Cousins go out and throw very well, and then he's just fallen off a cliff. And I've seen people say, and I agree with them, it's like there's no way you get that bad that quickly without there being some sort of injury. And he sprinted out right for the first time in a long time, looked good doing it. So the Achilles looks okay. So I don't know what's going on there, but he's, again, if he double clutches, it's an interception. If he double clutches and goes downfield, it's an interception. So hopefully there's a shock collar on him that is saying to someone, to him in his brain, remember the last time I did this, how bad it went? And just knock that off. And all of a sudden he cuts his interceptions in half. So, no, obviously, I know you're joking, JM, but you wouldn't sacrifice this game to see Penix. I think Penix is starting next year. And so does Bill Barnwell. Bill Barnwell's got about 1,500 words on it to basically say Penix is the starter next year. And we'll probably write that up later on Atlanta Falcons on SI. Real quick, I also want to say thank you very much to Lion Coffee. LionCoffee.com is one of the partners of the Falcons podcast. And it's not hyperbole to say they power Nick and Scott and the Falcons podcast every morning. Even when we're not here, we are powered by Lion Coffee throughout the day. And as a partner, they also have a 20% off. Holidays are coming up. Got a lot of stocking stuffers. These sizes are perfect little stocking stuffers. These are little 1.75 ounce individual packs that are great to slip into a stocking. You can get 20% off using our code GoFalcons20 on everything except 100% Kona or full cases. But they are in Hawaii. They are a Hawaii coffee company, and they are roasted, grown, shipped, all American, and it's all good, Nick.
Yeah, it's the best. Shout out to Lion Coffee. Shout out to Patrick. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And my mom, when she comes out and visits, she always loves to have Nick's special coffee stash, and has requested me to bring back a couple bags of it. So I don't know how much room we'll have. We're renting a car, starting that journey Saturday. Of course, there's snow and wind in the forecast, Scott, driving over those mountain passes. So good luck to myself. But no, it's the best. And shout out to Lion Coffee. Appreciate their support. And you guys support us, support them by checking them out.
Yeah, I got my parents. They use the K-Cups. So I got them. I like the whole beans. I grind. I'm the only one in my house that drinks coffee. So I grind and then use a French press. It's actually easier than doing a full pot and cleaning all that stuff out. So, but they use the K-Cups. And again, big fans of Lion Coffee here. We're not only just, partners, we are partakers, without a doubt. So I saw this post from Dave. I wanted to see it in here. Me talking about, doesn't part of you end up getting a little curious about just how bad it can get? And it's a coping mechanism, Dave. Otherwise it's one of those, you've heard the phrase, if you can't laugh, you'd cry. That's a little bit what it's like being a Falcons fan. And because Dave says, I understand your point. You're driving a terrible narrative. No, though, the worst thing about the ATL Falcons, the Atlanta Falcons, is our fan base. Honestly, that's what's most embarrassing. Dave, I would have a hard time disagreeing more with that. the fact that they are, let's see, depending on the Jets, they're tied with the Jets and one other team, I don't know who it is, but they're either the 5th worst or 3rd worst team in NFL history in winning percentage. What are we working on? 60 years now? 3rd worst or 5th worst? It's literally thousandths of a point. It's switched this year already based on the Falcons moved up from 3rd worst to 5th, and then it's that close through all of these games, through 1,000 games. It's down to percentage points for that low. You don't get that way because of your fan base. The worst thing about Atlanta Falcons is our fan base, honestly. So the fact that you've sold out the dome basically since Arthur Blank has been here and lowered prices up in the upper deck in the Georgia Dome, this is a very good fan base. And I've got another video talking about Atlanta United I recorded like in 2018. This isn't a bad sports town. We've had bad sports franchises. That's not our fault. As Atlanta fans, that's not our fault. The Atlanta Hawks, come on, man. They've never even been in the NBA Finals. How long have they been here? The Braves, if you grew up until 90, and the Braves are supported very, very well once they weren't a 100-loss team every year and the embarrassment of the major leagues. This isn't necessarily a bandwagon. Now, it is a very transient town, so people will go in and say, listen, the Dallas Cowboys are coming to town. I could sell the tickets I had to pay a PSL for and get some of my money back for $750 and do that. That's ownership's fault. So the worst thing about our fan base, honestly, I think Falcons fans are phenomenal simply for being fans through the years and having to get kicked in the nards constantly by their own franchise. So I have ultimate respect for Falcons fans because it ain't easy being an Atlanta Falcons fan. Keith Ellen Johnson, good to see you, Keith. Says, good morning, guys. If we lose this weekend, it will be a terrible loss in so many ways. Your chances for the playoffs fly out the window.
Yeah.
For one. And you've basically lost the team completely. In your first year, Nick, first-year coach, to spiral down the drain. You'd rather have us like, you'd much rather have us like, okay, you're going to finish 8-9. Okay, well, you'd rather start like 2-6 and then finish stronger to get to 8-9 than to start 6-3 and then spiral down the drain while you've got your $100 million quarterback on there. And instead of thinking, and then you got his replacement sitting there on the bench, you're not playing him. That's making things worse. It's not just Kirk Cousins by any stretch of the imagination. This defense is god awful.
Yeah,
but that's a big part of it, Nick.
Yeah, and special teams and the penalties, right? I mean, you can pull back so many layers of this onion, being like, how are we at where we're at right now? And you go through the stats, and it's like, man, not very good there, not very good there, undisciplined there, and even what made the defense good earlier in the season, not giving up the explosives, has really fallen off here the last 5-6 weeks. It's why it's a long season, right? And it always feels like fans, myself included, you get that like small enough data set and like 4 games, 6 games, like, oh, we know exactly who they are now. We can predict the rest of the season. And we know how it'll play out. It's so fluid. Week to week, injuries change things. Scheme change things. It's a week to week league. I say that on the show so much. And that's one thing I also keep coming back to here, Scott. It feels pretty doom and gloom right now. It's because Falcons fans, long tortured, right? You kind of know what it looks like. And odds are you're not going to make the playoffs now. Tampa Bay with a relatively easy schedule. Falcons have enough fatal flaws, but you still have 4 games. Right. So we'll see how it plays out. The season is not written yet. You still have, well, technically it's not easy math anymore. It used to be, that's in exactly a quarter of the season. Well, now it's 17 games that you play, but you have just less than the 23%, 22% to mental math on my head left of the season. A lot can change still. So we'll see. And there's not many teams I'd rather play than the Raiders. Now, the one thing I will say with the Falcons, I'm sure you feel this way as well, because I'm not going to pretend the Broncos are as tortured as the Falcons are. But during our decade-long horrible streak, it's a game like this. It's like, oh my God, why do we have to be playing a primetime game? Why does it have to be this? Like, why can't we just be, hidden away on a 10 o'clock one where only people locally are being forced to watch this one, rather than the primetime matchup with Ridder versus whatever's going on with Cousins right now. But again, this is a game, a lot of season left. You win this one, Tampa Bay probably going to lose to the Chargers. We'll see. I'd imagine I think we went over yesterday. Chargers are 1.5, 2.5 point favorite. But still 4 games to go. You're still very much in this. What's frustrating, though, is you had it. This is such a down division this season. You have every advantage. You spent the money, and right now you've blown it. But you still have 4 games to redeem yourself, and we'll see what happens.
If the Falcons win, they're at 50% to make the playoffs. If they lose, it's down to 19. And frankly, I think that's a lot.
Yeah.
Because the idea behind that is they should win. Yeah, they're in first place. How come it's only 50%? Because they should win these next 2 games. They're going to be heavy favorites. But the Buccaneers aren't necessarily going anywhere either. Mm-mm. And can you outrun the Buccaneers over the last 4 weeks? I saw a prediction in here, a question in here asking, "What's your prediction for the Bucs and Chargers?" I think the Bucs beat the Chargers. I think the Chargers are a fading team that have been decimated by injuries, and their offense is so poor. We saw how poor their offense was, right? It held them to 200 yards. This team held them to 200 yards. And then, you turn around and you get torched by a team that actually has a few offensive weapons that it's like, yeah, that looks more like it. That's what we were expecting. That I won't be surprised a bit if Tampa wins that game out there. Rio, good to see you. Love that picture of yours. Rio says, "Good morning, Falcons family. If we were able to replicate the pass rush from the last 2 weeks, we should be fine so long as Kirk doesn't turn it over in plus territory." I think every single one of his interceptions last week were in plus territory. And frankly, he should have had one more. That one that they called a simultaneous catch, that was an interception. I thought it was an interception live, and I thought it was an interception on replay. And they ended up giving the ball to Drake London. So that was a break that the Falcons couldn't take advantage of. So it was even worse. It's like, as bad as it's been, the numbers are probably even worse. As bad as it's been, it could have been worse. The numbers should be worse, is what I'm trying to spit out. So that's the big one, though. It was a great cruise, Brio, except for that iceberg. So yes. If only Desmond Ridder wouldn't turn the ball over, he'd be okay. Well, he couldn't stop turning the ball over, and now he's gone. Kirk Cousins is leading the NFL in interceptions.
He's got to be up near the top in fumbles as well. I don't know where that's at for quarterbacks. I don't have the exact list in front of me, but it has to be super high.
Yeah, for fumbles lost, the Falcons aren't that bad because maybe nobody else is fumbling. We talked about that with Bijan last year, because Desmond Ridder gave the ball so much. The Bijan kind of got a pass, but Bijan was putting it on the turf a lot last year too. Drake had a couple.
I have the number. He's tied for the most fumbles from a quarterback this season with 12 with Baker Mayfield.
That's a lot. 12 is one a game.
Not lost.
And let me see on season stats on turnovers. I think fumbles lost. I just don't think they're that bad.
No.
Because I looked it up yesterday. Giveaways, fumbles. The Atlanta Falcons, they've only lost 5 fumbles all year as a team. So again, they're fumbling. He's putting it on the turf a lot. They've recovered more than half, and knock on wood, nobody else has given the ball up. So overall, it's been pretty good. It's been pretty good. SFC Jay Williams, good to see you. He says, being from Warner Robins, Georgia, and El Paso, Texas, where I'm stationed, don't want the Falcons. This team has fallen off a cliff. There's games in there where you're like, okay, we're picking through them. It's understandable if you lose. You go at the beginning of the season, we didn't think you'd lose at Minnesota, but that's because everybody had Minnesota as a 3-win team. Well, they're not. So as the season goes along, if you lose that game to an 11-2 team, 10-2 team on the road, so be it. That's one that you'd understand. But it's a way they're losing some of these games too. It's they should have beaten the Saints. They should have beaten the Chargers. Chuck both of those, flush those right down the toilet. You win those 2 games, and instead of 6-7, you're sitting at 8-5. You're in the driver's seat. And forget that, the pass interference early, should have beaten the Chiefs. Forget that one. I'm talking about ones that you dominated. You absolutely dominated the game. Not a close game that came down to 1 or 2 plays. Those happen. You dominated the Saints. You dominated the Chargers. Pissed them both away. Those are the ones you can't have. You just can't have them.
No. We've gone through, I send you that graphic every week. It seems like, so a lot of times one of the more indicative, who wins, who loses, that they utilize. I think it's from Kevin Cole, former PFF. I could be mistaken there, but he uses the discrepancy in success rate. And the title of the graphic is did we lose that badly? And it shows like the discrepancy of if you had the higher success rate compared to your opponent, typically you win the game. And I think 3 of the last 4 weeks, the Falcons actually had a higher success rate than their opponent and still lost, which is improbable. I think the only team that really actually like thoroughly whipped on the Falcons a bit in terms of the success rate, which is 50% of the yards on first and second down that you need to go, and 100% of the yard on third and fourth down. It's determined a successful play. The only team that really beat them thoroughly was the Broncos. Other than that, I mean, you did better against the Saints. You did better against the Chargers. You did better against the Vikings. But it's these margins, special teams, the EPA, explosive plays against the Vikings, right? Those are the ones. Success rate, if you get a 3rd and 3 and you pick up the first down, that's the same yes/no binary outcome as a converting a touchdown on 3rd and 3, right? That's why EPA is probably a better stat. But you've been more consistent, successful moving the football and not letting teams move the football in 3 of your last 4 games. And yet here you are on a 4-game losing streak, and the season's quickly, on life support here. So very frustrating because it just feels like, again, comes back to the blown opportunity. We should not be where we are. You have nobody but to blame but yourself, Falcons, not fans or you and I, Scott. Yeah, it's unpalatable and a very frustrating product to watch because, again, you are moving the football. It's just every chance you can to shoot yourself in the foot. It seems like you're doing it.
Joe Andros says Seattle whooped us. I'm like, yeah, Seattle won that game pretty handily. It felt like. So, yeah, I didn't mention them. I'm just saying even the last, just in this recent 4-game winning streak, you dominated 2 games that you ended up losing through either special teams or turnovers or both. Penalties, et cetera, et cetera. And when you start going this, it's like, gosh, it seems like a different thing every week. What's that say? I mean, who's that fall on? That falls on the head coach. That falls on the head coach. And as Mike Harvey says, as Raheem Morris is proving the Peter principle. The Peter principle is you are good at what you do, so you get promoted, and you get promoted to a place where you're not good enough to be there anymore. That's the Peter principle. Saying that Raheem has been a good coordinator. He's been a good position coach, but he hasn't been successful as a head coach. And I'm not willing to give up on Raheem Morris at this point. And again, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we don't know. He's got bosses also. Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot were partners. They were pretty equal at least equal when it comes to personnel and player selection. I think Terry Fontenot won that battle, and he is making decisions over Raheem Morris, and we know Arthur Blank is making decisions over him. And if I'm the owner and you talk me into throwing in $90 million guaranteed, which turns into another $10 million guaranteed if he's on the roster on March 5th or whatever the first day of the new league year is this year, that becomes 90 becomes 100. And spending a top 10 draft pick on a quarterback, I might have a little say in personnel decisions. Now, I'm not saying that's happening, but I'm not saying it's not either. When we asked the question at the beginning of the season, how can this go wrong, Nick? A couple of things that we talked about was, get rid of that banner, but use GoFalcons20 at lioncoffee.com. A couple of things we talked about was Kirk Cousins, as far as, is he going to be healthy? Can he come back and play at a similar level to what he was playing last year before he got hurt? And then all the newness. We didn't feel quite as bad about the newness on defense because Raheem Morris is there. We felt okay about the newness on offense because you've got a veteran quarterback. Well, the defense is playing terrible, and now your veteran quarterback is playing terrible, and the newness is killing you because they don't know how to find their way out of this funk.
Yeah, they don't. Also, the other thing is I don't think they have the identity that we had hoped they would on defense. And I think it's something that I'm not calling, upset that you lost Arthur Smith, and you didn't have this last year. But before that, you had this ability to we're going to run the ball. And it worked out pretty well for the most part. And I think a lot of that has to do with Kirk Cousins' lack of mobility. Also, the offensive line injuries. I think that I thought Bergeron had a better game. I think he's been coming on a little bit as of late, but the center injuries have been an issue. Penalties, of course, as well. It's really untenable to throw the football or to run the football when it's 2nd and 20 after a hold, first down incompletion. So that's an issue as well. But you're not the rushing dominant team that you'd hope you'd be, considering when you look at the running backs, Tyler Algier, Bijan Robinson. You should be, in theory, you'd think you'd be up there with what the Eagles are doing right now, right? It's a little different. Obviously, they have an incredible offensive line and a mobile quarterback, but there's just nothing like, what is the best thing you do? Like, you can, at the end of your day, what do you hang your hat on as a team? Like, if everything's going to bleep, we can do this. We know we have this to lean on. Doesn't feel like you have that with this team, unfortunately. So it's rough, no doubt. Again, you still have 4 games left. I keep coming back to this. It feels like we're writing the post-mortem.
No, if everything goes away the way it should, and I'm talking about odds here, the Falcons are back in first place on Tuesday morning. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about, okay, they look better doing this. They look better doing this. And there will absolutely be a yes, but it was the Raiders. If they do well, if they do poorly, then we're driving stakes in them. Mm-hmm. We're shoveling that last pile of dirt on the coffin. Yeah. That's what's at stake. No pun intended. That's what's at stake this week, Nick. Yeah. It's a turning point. I mean, they've already turned, but now they're looking over the cliff. Or we're in a bad spot. Are we gonna jump into the water or not?
It's the Titanic at the end. Not to be morbid, but you have the people that climbed up to the top. It's like, okay, the ship's going down. Are we jumping from the nose there into the water, or are we just going down with the ship here? But we'll see. And Scott, I did find that the graphic I was talking about, the success rate differential. It's from Sam Hoppen, who on Twitter does a lot of good graphic stuff with the advanced statistics. And it's absolutely wild. So the Falcons had a bye week 12. So week 10, 11, 13, 14, I believe I'm correct there with the weeks. Not only did you have you're one of the few teams that loses and has a better success rate than the team you lost to, but in 3 of those 4 weeks, everything besides the Bronco week, you're the largest differential of any team in football. So, and it's by a lot compared to everybody else. So what does that say? You are having you're overall play to play, you're having a better game. You are having some WTF, holy bleep, singular plays in games that are gunshot wounds to the head.
Changers.
And the fumble from the special teams, these unbelievable deep touchdowns to Addison/Jefferson, pick sixes, picks in the red zone that are happening. That should be points drives, and the Valdez-Scantling touchdowns was the Saints as well. These ones are not captured, how impactful they are as singular plays in success rate. So really it is. I mean, you mentioned game rate. I would call them fatalities at this point. I mean, you're literally killing yourself with these plays. So I don't know if they're
going to get flagged with all this Titanic jumping off a cliff. And
I'm okay, guys.
We're going to get flagged for our use of language by YouTube on this, by the bots.
Yeah, that's not talking about any CEOs or anything going on, but the healthcare, what's going on? Keith Brugman, Kirk Cousins, and now Sam Darnold. Does Kevin O'Connell not get enough credit for Cousins' success? I mean, I think he's getting enough credit for Cousins' success. It's not specifically him propping up Cousins, because Cousins had good seasons before Kevin O'Connell got there. But I think more so it's like, I mean, Kevin O'Connell's getting every time you listen to national media talk about Kevin O'Connell, it's like he's one of the 3 best offensive minds in football. I can't wait to see what he can do with JJ McCarthy. He's going to get Sam Darnold getting paid $20+ million a year, blah, blah, blah. So O'Connell's getting credit.
Nick, this is a second coming of Sean Payton, only Kevin O'Connell's a much nicer person. Yeah. And what I mean by that is it Sean Payton or is it Drew Brees? Is it Sean Payton or is it Drew Brees? You don't really know. Kirk Cousins was putting up numbers no matter basically who his head coach was. He's always been able to put up numbers. Drew Brees, very similar, put up numbers. That he was a Pro Bowler at 24 years old with the LA Chargers. And then for one reason or another, it didn't work out, ends up with New Orleans and has a lot of success. Then when he's out, Jameis Winston comes in and plays the best ball of his life. Teddy Bridgewater goes on a 4-0 streak after the leg injury and gets a $80 million contract from the Carolina Panthers. All of a sudden, people are like, the Sean Payton guy, it's more than just Drew Brees. Sean Payton's pretty good. The same thing is happening for Kevin O'Connell right now because Sam Darnold has been so erratically inconsistent for all of his career that the fact that he's playing the best ball of his career now, people are saying, why is he doing that? And Kevin O'Connell is getting a ton of credit for it.
And as he should.
As he should. He's my coach of the year.
There's so many good options for Coach of the Year. I think LaFleur as well, and also, I mean, it's an NFC North award this year. It seems like, although Sean Payton, Denver's could get 10 wins after 5 over under.
How about that guy in the AFC North? I'll take Mike Tomlin too.
Oh yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of them. You can only pick one, and my vote would go to Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, a lot of good options, of course.
Because I would have already given one to Dan Campbell.
yeah.
I think the phrase I use for Dan Campbell, and sorry we're off topic here just a little bit, y'all, was Dan Campbell might get it the same way that Return of the King did the third Lord of the Rings movie. It's like they didn't give the first 2 movies anything because they knew the third one that's coming. They knew it was a trilogy. So they waited until the third one, and then they just gave them everything. It's like, well, the first one deserved it too. The second one deserved it too. And maybe the third one didn't deserve all of those. It's kind of a lifetime achievement award, an achievement award for where you've gone. Dan Campbell should have already gotten a Coach of the Year award. He might get it this year for the achievement award of what the culmination of having the best record in football at the end of the season. So we'll see. Jason, Oblivion Empire coming in. Thank you for the support with the super sticker, my friend, and all the support that you show us on social media as well. The likes and the shares whenever you are watching this on YouTube, or if you see it on Twix, or if you see it on Facebook, the like and the share goes a long way to reaching more Falcons fans and helping us grow, which we have because of people like y'all. So thank you very much. And Michael Ranquillo also doing the same, coming in and giving us a super sticker. So thank you. Thanks to all of y'all for helping us do this on Mondays and Wednesdays. It means a lot. One more topic I want to get into. Field Yates, one of the better draft analysts out there, one of the better NFL guys out there. He came out with his first mock draft, and frankly, just like last year, everybody and their brother, and I actually took this off of my screen. I clicked off of it and looked up something else. I clicked off and went to Bill Barnwell's. So I need to find it again, and I'll just look what I sent you.
Field Yates, baby.
Everybody is going to pick, just like they did last year, an edge rusher for the Atlanta Falcons. In this case, he's got the Falcons picking 17th. They're outside of the playoff window. And he's got them taking edge Shamar Stewart right after Jalen Walker goes number 16 to the Cardinals. And, he leads off by saying that the Falcons' need for an edge rusher is no mystery. They're 19 sacks, ranked last in the league this season. Isn't it crazy? They've doubled their sack total in 2 weeks, and they're still last. That's how bad they were.
Crazy.
Now, my question on this, Nick, is logic has gone completely out the window when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons in the draft. I don't think in four consecutive windows under Terry Fontenot, they haven't picked the guy that most people thought they would until it got right up to the draft. It's like, it's really looking like Drake London. It's really looking like Kyle Pitts. It's really looking like Bijan Robinson. They shocked everybody last year, so that one was kind of an outlier. But going in, nobody had Kyle Pitts really at 4. Drake London, that draft was a little different because it was like there were 7 premier guys and then a bunch right after that you could have gone a bunch of different ways. And then Bijan Robinson, you're just right at that spot where you can't necessarily hit hit the guy that you an impact player at a position of need. So you're going best prospect available. You go Bijan. But this year they're picking a little lower, we think. Picking a little lower in the draft. It's a deep draft for edges. I mean, is there any way they come out of this thing with a different position? Wide receiver, offensive tackle, or is it edge this year? Are the edges good enough that it will be an edge?
I think
never say never. I know, but
yeah, edges are good enough. But I will say, Scott, it's not the draft for it. And I know that we got a laugh here from Rudy in the comment here saying we're picking a right tackle in the first round. You have a left-handed quarterback who's had some serious injuries, and Caleb McGarry is on the final year of his contract. Offensive tackle has to be part of the discussion. I know we need defensive pass rush edge so badly, Scott, and that's probably what it is. Don't get me wrong. It's probably what it is, but I'll keep saying it in here. again, McGarry, especially now that you're not playing as much condensed heavy formations, he's a little bit more exposed in the true drop back pass sets. He's going to be, whoever's playing right tackle will be the blindside protector. I think that matters a little bit less with shotgun, but it still does matter.
And to your point, Nick, his contract is very, very workable next year. He won't play on that contract next year.
No
He'll
way.
either be extended or released.
Yep. And we'll see what happens with Jake Matthews as well. Obviously, he's not a superstar left tackle, but even just finding competency at the tackle position. I mean, you can watch like the Chiefs this season. Having a not good tackle can tank the entirety of your offense, even if you have arguably the best quarterback of all time. And they're not tanked, obviously, but they're so limited with what they can do because their tackle play is so bad. And Matthews would get paid if he was available for anybody, but I think tackle has to be up there as well. And cornerback. Now, granted, I think cornerback's weird this season, Scott. We have a long way to go. There are some names who could be possible, but after the first two, it feels like it's kind of a hodgepodge of guys I'm not ready to pick through just yet. You have Will Johnson at Michigan, and obviously Travis Hunter, who I think is going to be cornerback with some package wide receiver plays. Those guys aren't in range for the Falcons. So it's right now, edge has got to be, if I was setting odds, I'd put it like 60% edge rusher, which is high. Right now, I don't think any other position would be higher than 20, 25. But offensive tackle has to be part of the conversation, in my opinion, with where this team sets up right now.
Yeah, and we'll see if, there were some pretty good edge rushers available in free agency last year. And it seems like that those have been available the past few years. A couple of guys that have changed hands have been. Jonathan Greenard was one of those guys that we targeted. He was younger, coming away from the Houston Texans. I forget the guy's name. He was a backup at San Francisco, Sam something, and went to the Colts and he was a free agent pickup for them and had a pretty good season last year. So it's possible. Keith Brugman says, taking a look back, are we happy with Penix last year? Would you have taken another player in retrospect? I mean, the answer to that is thank God Penix is on the roster right now. But if we're playing the retrospect game, I'll rewind it back to what I've been saying since Michael Penix was drafted. Why on earth did you pay Kirk Cousins? I've got that as a short on the YouTube channel right now, Keith. I went and cut the reaction to Monday following the draft, where I said that every single move the Falcons made since signing Kirk Cousins said that they regretted signing Kirk Cousins. Their entire draft was full of guys that were backups for their 30-something-year-old players. Well, this roster wasn't good enough I can just go ahead and build for the future, and I'm going to go ahead and make a run in the playoffs. It's like, oh, we can get better. It was like the goal was let's throw our fans a bone, and we'll get better with a better quarterback. But we don't think this roster is good enough to win it. And that's okay, but you usually don't admit it quite that strongly because they went quarterback and defensive line. Well, you've got entrenched starters in both of those positions. So my number one goal was always, and frankly, we said it on Monday, the Minnesota Vikings had the offseason that I wanted the Falcons to have. They drafted a rookie quarterback. They got an inexpensive bridge quarterback in Sam Darnold that's playing out of his mind. They went and got Jonathan Greenard in free agency, and then they drafted Dallas Turner. That's exactly what I wanted this team to do. And then secondary, Nick, was in the secondary, was to get another cornerback because they were like a cornerback too, at least one. And then safety was a big question coming in with DeMarco Helms and Richie Grant. So that was the offseason I wanted if we're going to play the retrospect game.
Yep. Yeah, and I think this is a weird spot for the Falcons as well because right around this range, Scott, you're looking, and there's a lot of edge rushers, but there's also a lot of really good interior defensive linemen as well. And given your investment last season, I almost wonder if you're going to not prioritize that. But I'd caution you to do that. I liked Arohoro last season. Granted, I liked him more round 3 than where the Falcons got him.
Well, they traded a round 3, and they used a 2 and a 3 to get him.
I know. Yep. That's we'll see. I mean, he's toolsy, but next season will be you want to see what they are halfway through their third season. I think that's typically where you kind of see once you're halfway through your third season in the league, you know who these guys are for the most part. There's obviously exceptions, but there's going to be a lot of interior defensive tackles in this range that are of a lot of interest. Kenneth Grant at Michigan, who's more of a nose tackle type, but man, he is a freak athlete. You have Walter Nolan at Ole Miss, Derek Harmon at Oregon, I like a lot. You also have potentially Alfred Collins out of Texas, who's a lot of fun, who might get up there as well. And you have a lot of edge rushers too in this range. In this first round, from pick 11 on, I know he's been a popular pick. James Pierce Jr. He's kind of more of a Brian Burns. You don't really love him setting the edge, but man, he is really good as a pass rusher coming off the edge, speed guy. So he's definitely on the table for the Falcons. Jalen Walker's more.
I wouldn't mind seeing Nick Scourton.
Yeah.
Depending on, again, Jimmy Lake isn't going to be here next year. And if he is,
4 games, we'll see. I think you're right.
If he is, he's not running a 2-4. He's not running a 2-4 nickel anymore because he's gotten away from that already.
Yeah.
That seeing Zach Harrison and Nick Scourton, 2 really athletic defensive end types at 6'4 plus, 280 plus on the field at the same time would be very interesting to me. And it's Chris, good to see you, Chris. Chris kind of agrees with you on this. He says, good morning, Scott, Nick, and everyone watching. Do we really want Penix starting with McGarry on his blind side? Probably not. It could be right tackle. It makes sense. I mean, you've put the Falcons defense has been bad. You remember Dean Pease saying this has got to change. The culture of this defense, it's got to change. How long has this team been in the 20s in defense? Well, forever. And you talk about the investment that they've made, quarterback, running back, wide receiver in the last 4 drafts. Well, by God, we got to protect those guys now. We can't have a hole in the offensive line. We better make sure the right tackle's taken care of to protect Michael Penix's blind side. The defense isn't going to get better with 1 pick anyway, so let's get our offense shorn up and then see if we can address it in free agency. That could happen.
Yeah. Again, we're talking about all these prospects here I know we want to get moving here soon, but talk about the defense tackle, the edge rushers. You mentioned Scourton. He's so young. He's kind of weird where he's 280 and he's not the most twitched, but for his size, he has good flexibility. I feel like in a lot of draft classes, he'd be more of maybe a George Karlaftis type, where I don't think he's like a primary guy.
He's a defensive end. I mean, he's too big to play. He's just like Zach Harrison. He's too big to play a 3-4 edge linebacker.
He's more flexible than
but he's still too big. He doesn't have the burst to play a 3-4 outside, a 3-4 edge. If he's playing in a 3-4, it'll be inside. It'll be at defensive end or a 4-3 defensive end.
His teammate is the one who they mock, obviously, you mentioned here, and he's the one who's the most intriguing to me. Now, granted, he's a Zach Harrison archetype, but he is way more explosive. He's one of those ones, Scott, where we're talking, not to get too nerdy in here, but the equation of momentum is mass times velocity. And he is so fast off the ball at 290 pounds that sometimes he arrives out of control. And that's not always a bad thing per se, because my God, is he disruptive. And I sent you clips of his 6 weeks ago, Scott, being like, holy moly, this guy is a freak athlete. Watch for him. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he has such a combine, given his measurables, Scott, that he works his way up into the top 5, the top 10, just because it's the Trevon Walker pathway where I don't think he's as fluid as Walker, but man, he's a demon. Also, apparently his character stuff is off the charts. One of the reasons he went to College Station is because he didn't want distractions elsewhere. He wanted somewhere a little bit more remote. So he's a young, toolsy guy, but we talk about edge rushers here. You mentioned Scourton a little bit later. You got also Mike Green from Marshall, who I think leads college football in sacks and tackles for loss. I could be incorrect there, but he's been awesome out there. Kyle Kennard at South Carolina also comes off the board a little bit later. So yeah, there's a lot of different options here for the Falcons at tackle. The names I'll mention here, you don't have a chance at the top 2 as it stands in Banks from Texas or Campbell from LSU, but you have really just after you pick Josh Simmons from Ohio State coming off the board. He did suffer a season-ending ACL injury against Oregon, so his tape is limited. But man, his tape, the tools look great. The feet, everything like that looks really good. You have other offensive tackle options coming off the board a little bit later. Texas's Cameron Williams, who is a monster. I don't love how much he's on the ground. He's still a little bit raw, but he actually has the the body type, frame, athleticism, power that projects to tackle, which is half the battle for offensive tackle. Honestly, it's tackle's so weird. There's such an archetype matters. And then you have Ursary out of Minnesota also coming off in the pick 31 to the Chiefs in this mock, and he's played left and right tackle. So there are options at those positions. I know you mentioned wide receiver earlier, Scott. I'm not as in on the wide receiver given what we've seen from Mooney and London, but I think right now
I was kind of kidding on that. If they do anything that stupid, it'll be a tight end. They'll go with Loveland to replace Pitts.
Tyler Warren too is interesting.
Yeah, if they do anything that dumb. Now, another option on this, y'all, is go get the best interior lineman in the draft, which you can get in the teens, and Matthew Bergeron kicks over to right tackle.
Oh yeah, that's obviously an option too. We talked about that when they drafted him.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is with Robinson here, you have a very specific type of body. If you want to run the run game, is how much outside zone that you're playing. You have to have some mobility at that right tackle spot. It cannot just be a road grader. There has to be some mobility, balance, the ability to heat-seeking missile at the second level, because no team runs more outside zone than the Falcons. Some of that maybe is part of the Kirk Cousins lack of mobility and trying to get some movement from the line of scrimmage horizontally, because you're not really getting that with moving pockets in the pass game. But yeah, I think right now, if I'm setting it, Scott, it'd be edge is way up here. Then you got offensive tackle. Then you got your conversations with maybe cornerback and whatnot. But I think edge and offensive tackle got to be the most likely positions. And one thing also, Scott, we haven't talked about it on here. I know we're talking draft so much. Oh, one more tackle I wanted to mention. Connolly from Oregon. He had a phenomenal game in the he's a great athlete. I do have questions about the anchor a little bit, but he had an awesome game for Oregon. And if you want to check out a premier versus premier matchup, if you can, there's not that many snaps of it because teams can move around edge rushers, but Abdul Carter, who's my favorite player in the class along with Travis Hunter, versus Conlery from Oregon. That's a premium matchup for sure. So you're going to get more of that with Oregon in the playoffs coming up here, because they're going to get Ohio State or Tennessee, I believe. So you could get James Pierce versus Conlery as well. So those are the names to keep an eye on with this early primer. Final thought here, Scott. We kind of hand wringing. I know I'm on my thing, but this is important, I think. We hand wringing and whatnot. Oh man, the quarterback, blah, blah, blah. If you were in a position where you didn't take quarterback last season and you felt forced to take one this year with where you're picking and what this quarterback class is, holy bleep. We are in you'd be told by the way I'm talking that I'm talking around the fact that I don't like any of these quarterbacks. Be a lot of like soft language in there. You should be very thankful that you took an option last season, because the guys that are in the conversation this season, not very good. I think not that they're terrible. Sanders and Ward are going to go early, but that's out of more desperation. This mimics more 2019 than other classes.
Again, let me be clear on this. It wasn't the Michael Penix pick that I objected to so vehemently. It was signing Kirk Cousins and then a Michael Penix pick. I wanted the rookie all along. Again, yes, if you wanted your quarterback, take your quarterback. He's 24 years old. He's mature. Let him go. He must be baked in the oven for 1 year or else he's going to bomb is nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. If they can play, they can play. Well, look what happened to these guys who bombed out. They probably would have bombed out anyway because they weren't good enough. Very rarely do you shell. There's guys out there. Was it David Carr that got his eggs scrambled pretty good? I mean, he was seeing ghosts. A lot of the quarterback is having the right coaching staff and being in the right team. There's a reason why quarterbacks seem to fail in the same places over and over again, right? Cleveland. It's part, and then where they have success in the same places. It's not necessarily, he played too early or whatnot. It's and again, some of these guys are just different. They're 24 years old coming out with 60 college starts. We're not talking about Anthony Richardson here. So
also, we don't know. We don't know unless we know, Scott, because you talk about like the best situation ever for a first overall pick, Caleb Williams. I'm not giving up on Caleb Williams, but it's been poor here from him. And it actually was some rot behind what looked like a good roster. And then you have the Patriots. I mean, they have, according to a lot of metrics, the worst offensive line in football. According to a lot of metrics, one of the worst pass catching units in football. I mean, they have Keyshawn Butte as their X receiver. Jalen Polk has been horrific this year. They can't run the football. Drake May looks incredible. Drake May looks, I mean, if I was redrafting last year's class right now, I'm not going to say this on the Broncos show because I don't need, death threats coming to my house. But if there was a redraft of the entire class, I'd be taking Drake May 1 overall, Jaden Daniels 2, and then it's a conversation with Williams and Nix for 3 and 4, which is a big stock up for Nix, but
for sure.
That'd be seen as sliding.
We were
him
talking Nix second round. We were getting him in the second round in most of our mocks.
Yeah.
Real quick on this. This was the title of our show, so I want to get into this before we get out of it about the odds of Desmond Ridder having a heater. Besides the fact that it's just, I do worship at the altar of Murphy's Law. Whatever bad can happen will happen. I am a firm believer. And Falcons fans, you should be too. You've seen it enough. But when we start looking at the Atlanta Falcons passing defense, it's like, all right, well, how could this be? The Atlanta Falcons have the second worst passer rating against at 105.5. They are the worst. It's actually gotten worse, Nick, since Bo Nix threw for 80% completion rate. They're up to 72% completion rate against, which is worse than the NFL. They have given up 26 passing touchdowns. Guess where that ranks? You got it. Worse than the NFL. They have 19 sacks. That is worse than the NFL, but that's trending in the right direction. This lower sample size says that is improving. I'm okay with that. Yeah. The other team that is worse than the NFL is tied. Is Houston Texans also has 26 touchdowns, so the Falcons are tied for last. But they have 16 interceptions. So they're playing really high-risk, high-reward defense. The Falcons only have 7. There's 7 interceptions with that secondary is 19th in the NFL. And something that I thought was very interesting, Nick, I saw there's a metric on here that says first downs by penalty. And like 2 of the top 3 teams are 2 of the top 3 defenses in the NFL. Why is that? Because they're playing press man and they're aggressive as hell. They're super aggressive, so they're giving up a few more penalties. The Denver Broncos, I think, were third in the NFL. The Detroit Lions were number 1 in giving up first downs on penalties.
It's the cost of business.
Last?
It's the cost of business.
You know who was last by a long shot?
Falcons?
The Atlanta Falcons. Why is that? Because they're not close enough to hold. They're not close enough to interfere.
Yeah.
They're playing so far off that they're not giving up any penalties on defense for first downs. But by God, they're giving up a bunch of first downs because they're nowhere near their opponents. Yeah. So, yes, Desmond Ridder, if you could pick any defense right now to face, it'd be the Atlanta Falcons. It'd be the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are at a turning point in the season. They're at a moment where they could be in first place or their season could be ended on Monday Night Football, and we're here for it. We'll talk about it on Monday, and we'll see you again on Tuesday. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I want to say thank you to our Super Chat superstars. Greg coming in early, Titus, JM Huddle, Keith, as always, Rio, always a consistent star giver, SFC, Jay Williams, thank you so much. Mike, I believe in Empire, Michael Ranquillo, the Sunset and Sunrise, and Keith Brugman as well. Thank you so much. Also, thank you to Lion Coffee. Y'all make sure you go to lioncoffee.com and use your code GoFalcons20. We've only got about 2 weeks left until Christmas. Get your order in. Get your stocking stuffers. You should get 20% off. It's in the description of the podcast and the video if you haven't seen it, if you want to check it later. Other than that, Nick, I think we're about done.
Yep. It's time. I got to head over and talk a little Broncos Colts. Again, I've said it on here. It's a week-by-week league. Things can change quickly. You have the Buccaneers lose to the Chargers, which is the more likely scenario right now. You have the Falcons beat the Raiders, which is the more likely scenario right now. My prediction, I think the Falcons are going to win this one rather easily. I know that's famous last words. I was just calling it, hey, you know what? Maybe they'll win against the Vikings. Seems like too much good going on with Darnold. Then he has the game of his career. But I'm going to go with the Vikings winning this one. The Falcons winning this one 34-16. The Falcons have the lowest 3-and-out rate per drive in the league this season. They're moving the ball pretty well. And the Raiders are not very good at taking the ball away also. So I think Falcons are going to win this one comfortably.
My only prediction on this game is an if-then scenario. If the Falcons lose this game and they don't put Michael Penix in at home against the Giants, we're not going to see Michael Penix. There's no way, no how. He's in bubble wrap for the entire season other than an injury. Then it's Kirk Cousins or for life, for the rest of the season, which I don't agree with, but it ain't my team. Arthur Blank got to spend a whole lot of money to have those have those kind of decisions made for him. So on that note, we're going to get out of here. Looks like the sun is finally coming out after about 3 straight days of rain. So hopefully you get outside and enjoy a fabulous football weekend. And we'll see y'all on Monday. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Peace.